Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about the Spanish Colonial, which was built at around the same time as sort of the quote-unquote East Coast Colonials, which we've been building so far on this channel, and that's the only thing it has in common. However, since it has so much Spanish influence, it's going to look remarkably similar to a lot of the other Spanish influence build styles, such as the Spanish Revival Mediterranean and other sort of Mediterranean subtypes. I've done my best to pull out what is unique about the Spanish Colonial, just because these styles can start overlapping very, very quickly. As always, if I mess up, if I get something wrong, feel free to leave your questions, corrections, and suggestions in the comments down below. And with that, let's talk a little bit more about how these homes are structured. Similar to other homes in the region, this structure is originally built with adobe, but then it has a white plaster on the outside. Now, the adobe and plaster do not hold up well to rapid temperature changes, so as the Spanish Colonial moved north, it also transitioned building materials, so more northern Spanish Colonials will actually have white brick instead of white plaster, and they're more likely to have shingled roofs as opposed to tile, again for weather reasons. This is The Sims 4 Do What You Want. Way back in the 1600s when these homes were first being built, they tended to have sort of an L shape around a centralized courtyard and may not even have interior doors, but would instead sort of have a very indoor-outdoor sort of living style where you'd actually have to walk through the courtyard to access other areas of the house. We're not going quite that old-fashioned today. The Spanish Colonial in and of itself tended to have small windows, not very much ornamentation. At most, you might see some tile steps or doorways, but everything else is pretty much going to be wood, stone, tile, and plaster. Exposed beams in the ceiling are definitely a big part of the style. However, it's tended to be more flat ceilings, and you cannot actually have exposed beams on flat ceilings with just the base game. I'll get into that more later. The Spanish Colonial in and of itself is a one-story build. However, because it has been around for so long, it's really sort of started to mix with a lot of other home styles, so you may see a lot of what is marketed as a Spanish Colonial that is actually multiple stories, and that's because it's Spanish Colonial Suburban, Spanish Colonial meets Craftsman sort of styles. So if you see a multi-story, it's kind of like a crossover between two styles. Moreover, the actual one-story Spanish Colonial is what sort of gave birth to the ranch, which is now one of the, if not the most common home style in the United States. That is a lot of information about not a lot of house. Let's get building. I'm starting on a 20 by 15 in Oasis Springs today. First, we're going to start with a 5 by 13 rectangle, which is, if you're starting also on a 15 wide lot, it's going to be just one tile in from either side, and then we're going to go down 5. And then I'm going to add a 4 by 6 rectangle over here. I apologize if you can hear either a Planets song or a roaring dinosaur in the background. That is what we are doing today, apparently, is planets and dinosaurs. Anyway, so this is sort of our main L shape, right? But we're going to dress it up a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of a bump out here so we can have a slightly more pronounced entry. And then I'm going to add a loggia off the back here, which is going to be 4 tiles deep and 5 tiles wide. A loggia is sort of a half in, half out sort of area, and I'm actually going to turn this into our dining room. I also am going to add a 4 by 2 bathroom here, and this is going to be a bedroom. So I'm not going full on rustic with this one, but it's definitely not super new fashioned either, so hopefully a good little mix. To draw in our courtyards, I'm actually going to start with using a half wall just because that will give us the floor like this, and I'm going to add one to sort of square off the front here, and I'm going to add one at the back. I'm going to make this one a bit bigger so that I can add a pool. We can remove this wall with our wall tool by holding control. And I'm actually going to open this wall up with my budget spandrel here. I'm not going to add columns because I don't really care for how it sort of flares out at the side. It's a little bit too ornamental for this build style. However, if you wanted to use one of the more simple spandrels from Cats and Dogs, Cottage Living, or Seasons, those could work really well here, and you could use columns if you wanted to. I am going to sort of keep these as 2 separate rooms, which will help a little bit with lighting and painting, so that's why I'm using the spandrel there. While we're on the subject of spandrels, this is the one part that is going to be not base game friendly, is if you actually want to add exposed beams in your ceiling, and here's why. To add exposed beams on a flat ceiling, what you first have to do, and I actually posted a short about this earlier, perhaps you saw it, is you're going to draw the walls first. In our case, we're going to want them 2 tiles apart, and then you'd add your spandrel anywhere that you want it to be open. We can see this from up top. Now, if we put the walls down to like half walls or whatever, you can't actually see it, so it won't interfere with the gameplay too much. But the issue with all of the base game spandrels is either they are way too fancy for this particular build style, or even if I use this one and not just the budget one, you can't actually see them when you're inside the house. So what you're going to have to do instead, if you want to do this, is just basically you can't use the base game. Cats and Dogs, Country Living, or Cottage Living, or whatever this one is, and the Seasons those you can all see from the inside. If it's possible to add this to your build, especially if you want to take screenshots inside of gameplay or whatever, I highly recommend it. It's just really nice to have something other than a flat white ceiling. Unfortunately, it's just simply not base game friendly. It would be really nice if they gave us some more base game spandrels at some point, but today is not the day. Let's talk about the roof. To keep this as easy as possible for you guys, we're going to use the half-hipped roof. Now we can have open gable faces, that's totally normal for this roofing style. However, in order to get them to all intersect properly, it's just going to be easier if we do the half gable. We're going to pitch that down to half or lower of the original height, about like that. And now if I copy it and rotate it this way, I can push this in. And you can see that sort of half-hip roof structure just lines right up. And then if I copy this again and place it going this way, once again it lines up without having any weird glitches. To accent the entry, I'm actually going to use a half gable, pull it into this roof, and then pitch it down till it lines up where I want it. And if you really want to, I've seen this on a few of my reference images, you can slightly curve this roof piece, just for a little bit of, cool stuff. And if you really want to get creative, press Shift-C while the roof piece is selected, and that'll give you all sorts of curving controls. So you could actually do like a little S-curve sort of thing like that if you wanted to. I have a whole video about how to curve roof pieces if you're interested in that. I can link it up in the corner. And then as far as roof sort of coloring and whatnot goes, you're going to go with the tile roof. Then I'm going to grab the angled roof trim today and grab brown to create sort of a wrapping under edge on this roof. For walls, you're going to go with white plaster. You could potentially go with the white stucco if you want to have a little bit more texture, but I'll be going with the plaster since this is a little bit more of a modern build. And if you wanted it to feel more rustic, you could just simplify the exterior and get rid of this little bump out thing here. Maybe get rid of the pool, add a pond instead. And really just watch how you're placing your windows and your furniture inside. That's really what's going to kind of determine how old and rustic this build style is going to feel, because from the outside it's just very simple. If you're interested in something even more rustic than this, I would recommend the Adobe Revival over here, which I can link in this card. If you like this more Spanish influenced Mediterranean, we did a Spanish Revival Mediterranean, not as beginner friendly, but if you're looking for something larger, I highly recommend checking that one out. That's not in this neighborhood though, so I cannot show you. Enough about other houses, let's keep going with this one. For pretty much anything that's sort of Spanish or Mediterranean influenced, I recommend sticking with sort of the Mega Collection. This is going to give you all the same wood tones, it's very simple and rustic feeling, which is great. Anything from that kit that's free right now is going to look great in this build style as well, but I will be using the Mega Collection today. So I'm actually just going to use this little guy for my front door. And I'm going to grab these windows. It's not uncommon to have arched windows, but they will be pretty small, and some of the windows could even be shuttered like this one. I do have the quarter tile placement turned on, which you can use by pressing your F5 key on your keyboard. So you could do something like that if you wanted to. And it's not in this collection, so I'll actually have to go into the Windows bar, but it's also not uncommon to actually have small rounded windows sort of in your roof pieces. I don't want to have too many windows in my bedrooms because then they'll be too light and bright, but I will place another window looking out into the back courtyard in this bedroom, and I'll place a slightly larger window in our living area. I'm going to place a window in the kitchen as well, just because that's nice. And then over here, I'm going to be using a few of these old meets view sort of window meets arch sort of things. I will also be using the corresponding narrow mission style arch to help this space feel open. You can access sort of this backyard here where you'd probably have maybe an herb garden or something, as well as the back courtyard, which has a pool. It lets lots of light and fresh air into this part of the house as well, which is great. Most Mediterranean style homes or anything in the desert, for interior doors, I don't really want them to be windowed, so I'm just going to grab some dark wood, plain old normal doors. And I think that's it for doors and windows. The inside is probably going to be just the same sort of plaster. However, if you want to sort of update it, make it feel a little bit more modern, or if you're trying to take this style out of the desert and bring it, like I talked about in the intro, up to a more northern area, you'd exchange this for bricks, paint the inside, and probably have these be actual windows and not arches, because this pretty much only works for an area where it doesn't snow. For flooring, we're going to stick with tiles, inside and out, and in your pool. I am going to put my kitchen in this area here. It's going to be an L, and there's not really enough room for an island because we want to keep this open for traffic flow. As always, I do recommend using wooden cabinets for older style builds. I've been using the escargot a lot, but if you're looking at other not base game options, the Brohill from Parenthood actually has some really great swatches in it. And if you really want to look rustic, you could just go for some open cabinets from the Snowy Escape set. I'm adding some upper cabinets just to sort of fill up this wall and just a little range hood there. And in this space, I do not currently have move objects on, and here is like you can fit a whole 3-tile table in there, or you could fit a 2-tile table and then just have seats all the way around. And you could have it facing this way or like this. If you want to expand this and add more bedrooms, if you watched the Spanish Revival build, I talked a little bit about how this courtyard would like basically slowly become more of a centralized courtyard where you just keep sort of adding rooms around it, and then if your house gets big enough, you could have another courtyard still at the back. This will make a fine living area, and as far as the bathroom is concerned, because this home was obviously designed with interior plumbing in mind, you can do whatever the heck you want. As long as this side of your bathtub is accessible, your Sims should be able to still get in and out, or whatever side of the bathtub the animation is on, which I believe is usually on the faucet side. I really love how timeless this sort of layout is, because I could update this really easily and immediately make it feel much more mid-century or even contemporary with just switching out some of the doors and windows. Like, how cool is that? I know I don't show evolutions like that a lot, like Pokemon or something. Often it's due to recording time. Also, I've considered just making videos talking about how to take your core style and then mix it with other styles, like taking a Spanish colonial and mixing it with a mid-century, or making it super contemporary, or any other combination. Anyway, we still have to do landscaping, sort of finish up our courtyards here. Before we do that though, if you haven't already, I highly recommend subscribing. My goal was to hit 500 subscribers, so not only can I access the community features, ask you guys direct questions, post memes, do polls, stuff like that, but I can also use that number as a gauge to know that this series is interesting and I can continue this in January, which would just be delightful. Let's go ahead and finish up these courtyards here. I was going to plan on using some fences because then I can add gates, but just using half walls is great too, especially since you can actually truly match the color of the wall to the half walls. I'm just going to grab this little gate because it matches, and I'll line it up with my front door. They're pretty close. There we go. Then this area could easily become outdoor seating. I don't know if you guys knew this, but if you have the Desert Oasis kit or whatever it's called, a lot of this furniture is quite modular and it all sort of looks like it's all built in together, which is awesome because that is a huge factor in both the Spanish inspired and the more originally Mexican build styles, is actually having built-in furniture like this. So if you have this pack, doing something like this on your front patio is really lovely. There's a cute little matching coffee table too. Even if you're just sticking with the base game, you can do some nice stuff as well. Putting out a nice, more sort of rustic bench, and possibly even a chess table, because we all know we need those, would be great options for this space. The backyard would be a good place to sort of do an outdoor kitchen, either with something that's a little bit more traditional and rustic looking like this, or just straight up building in an outdoor kitchen. This seems to be glitching with the fence, so I probably won't do that, but it's an option, something that I forget about a lot, just doing like outdoor kitchens. So I'd probably use this space for planter boxes, just because having a place to garden is always an asset. And I think I just sort of have to add at least one of these telescopes into every build now, because I'm just so happy that we have normal sized telescopes now. As far as actual plants go, this is going to be pretty much the exact same as the other Spanish influenced builds we've done, or Southwest. I should just call them Southwest builds. The Southwestern style builds they're going to revolve heavily around gravel and brick and local plants and rocks. Basically, does it need water? Yes. Don't put it in. So I'm going to start by sort of darkening some of my soil right here so I can place a small bit of garden, layering that dirt in. I'm going to start with a couple of rocks, which, as we have discussed before, do not need water, and it is extremely courteous of them to be so environmentally friendly. I was trying to figure out why I can't place my rocks, and I realized I haven't turned move objects on yet for this build. But you know what? I think I won't. It's pretty rare that I actually build without move objects on, and this build is definitely simple enough that it could totally handle a not move objects gardenscape. Looking at some of the plants around me, we have some knotgrass grass, some daisies, and this agave plant. So let's see how many of these we can actually fit in here. Well, not the agave plant. Here are those daisies. Oh, we can fit some of those in if we're very careful. I'm going to add in a couple of these succulents and a couple more rocks. Alright, that is technically no move objects on. But yes, very light landscaping. If you want to add a little path, you can use a little bit of the darker sand and then grab some gravel or pavers or bricks. Probably gravel. Well, that one's cute. That's nice. I'm also going to sort of darken up some of the ground around the foundation. If you're building in grass, I tend to use like sort of a muddy color, but in the desert, it's not like the grass is going to die because there isn't any. So I recommend using this Just Desert or possibly Garden Bedlam or just one of the more light brown colored dirts. but the same rules still apply. Apply it under your foundations, under your fence, under anything else that may be in your yard, and it just adds a nice little bit of dimension. Let's do a quick little recap. The Spanish Colonial isn't really very similar to the other colonials, simply because it was built on the opposite side of the continent. These are definitely more utilitarian and simple homes, and tend to really not have much ornamentation out here at all. You're definitely going to have at least one courtyard, if not two, like we have on this one, and one of these loggias, I think is how they're pronounced. I googled it and then I forgot. As far as floor plan goes, you're going to start with sort of an L shape and then just sort of build out a bit from there. If you want to go super rustic, not having interior doors and having everything sort of centered around a courtyard would be a great way to sort of do that, similar to a Roman domus, which is like super old. And if you want it to feel more updated still, you can start crossing it over with some more recent constructions, you know, anything past maybe 1850. And that will help you get a second story if you want the space in that direction. You can add more colors, different furniture, perhaps different flooring types, but for the most part, if you're just sticking with the Spanish Colonial and you want to stick sort of to those roots, tile floors, it's open to the outdoors in at least one area, kitchen outside as well as in, or sort of a hybrid, which is kind of what we have here, and you're just going to be sticking with one story. And I believe that is all I have for you guys today on the Spanish Colonial. If you're new here, I highly recommend you check out the rest of this playlist. I have beginner friendly as well as slightly more advanced builds. I have builds with just the base game and a couple that use a couple of the other packs, but of course any build style you can get to know much better even if you do just have the base game. The other video is just something YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. Thank you again so much for building with me today, and I look forward to building with you again tomorrow. Bye!